Hi, I'm going to tell you a bit about our paper, Tokenization is Sensitive to Language Variation at ACL this year. I'm Anna, and this is joint work with Dong and David. There's been a lot of work on tokenizers that have found different things. For example, that the choice of tokenizer can influence the fairness of a model in terms of varying inference costs across different languages or spelling variations. And tokenizer choice can also influence downstream performance. For example, in arithmetic tasks when working on a domain with specific vocabulary or across different scripts and languages. In this work, we were setting out to look at tokenizers in the context of language variation, as tokenizers might similarly influence downstream performance for different types of language variation. Now first, what is language variation? Well, variation in language is ubiquitous. For example, it can be lexical, orthographic, or syntactic. And usually it is socially meaningful. So it can center around a specific region, social class, gender, and so on. Now, very common tasks that we like to look at in NLP and that have also been looked at in the context of tokenizers are semantic tasks like natural language inference. So look at this example where we have two sentences. A guy learned guitar and a man learned an instrument. And you probably would say, looking at this task, that one sentence is entailed from the first. Now there's also other types of tasks in NLP, which I call here form and style-based tasks, like authorship verification. And then having the same two sentences would lead you to probably have the conclusion that they were written by different authors. And that is because of different reasons. So for example, I highlighted here some that you might base your decision on. So the first being learned is written with the American and with the British spelling, but also like casing and punctuation marks might play a role here. Similarly, for semantic tasks, we could also highlight parts of the words that are semantically meaningful or are basically the signals one would need to look at to solve the NLI task. And in the context of this work, we call tasks that are form and style based tasks that require sensitivity to language variation. So to solve it, we kind of need to look at signals that show the language variety that's being used. Opposed to that stand tasks that require robustness to language variation. The example here being NLI, and really we don't really want to know about whether it's American English or British English, but just what's the content. Just give me the basic core meaning. And now this kind of example also already highlights that different types of tasks might profit from different signals and then potentially from different tokenizers, which leads me to the research questions that we asked in this work. The first motivation for the first research questions is what I just said, right? Different types of tasks, the semantic or form-focused tasks, or rather the variation-sensitive and variation robust tasks need to make use of different signals. As a result, we ask, do tasks that are sensitive to language variation need different tokenizers than tasks that are robust to language variation? The second motivation for the second research question was, well, tokenizers that compress better are usually assumed to be better. So compress here means that are better able to compress text. And the resulting research question would be, does better compression lead to better performance for tasks that are sensitive to language variation? The approach that we went with here is basically decide what tokenizers we're interested in, create models based on those tokenizers, and test the models on an evaluation framework with tasks that are robust to language variation and tasks that are sensitive to language variation. So first, the tokenizers, well, we looked at byte pair encoding only. And looked at three different kind of settings. So the fitting corpus, the vocabulary size, and the pre-tokenizer. The fitting corpus, so what the tokenizer is fitted on, is intuitively connected to a language variation because it might show a variation or not. The vocabulary size kind of decides if less common language varieties are included in the vocabulary. And the pre-tokenizer is typically less well known, but it's basically hard coding knowledge about a language. A very common pre-tokenizer, for example, hard codes English contractions. And it usually also does not allow, well, it can do things like not allowing merging across Unicode character categories. Then for modeling, we work with logistic regression and BERT-based models that we train from scratch. And we evaluate on several tasks here. I'm not going to get into the details that are robust to language variation and sensitive to language variation. Quickly to the results. So here you see for the pre-tokenizers and the vocabulary size, the aggregated performance scores for tasks that are robust to language variation, and the aggregated performance scores for tasks that are sensitive to language variation. So the first observation we made that pre-tokenizers kind of had the greatest overall influence on performance, right? So here you can see the difference between no pre-tokenizer and GPT-2 was the biggest compared to fitting corpus choice and vocabulary size. Then we found that tokenized settings can perform differently on semantic and form-focused tasks. So this was our research questions, and we actually found that here you can see the 4,000 vocabulary size works better on the tasks robust to language variation, and the bigger vocabulary size works better on the tasks sensitive to language variation. So when we go back to this research question, we can say, no, the same tokenizers aren't performing well for tasks robust and sensitive to language variation. But when we actually look back at these scores, the aggregated differences are pretty small, right? And when we look even closer and look at specific subtasks, we find that the best performing choices for these subtasks are often not the same as the overall best performing and are not really consistent between the different subtasks. So we really want to highlight the need for future work to investigate different types of language variation and tasks individually. So yeah, first research question, no, but further investigation is necessary. For the second research question, no, better compression does not lead to better performance. For tasks that are sensitive to language variation, you will find some details in the paper. As a small teaser for the paper, the corpus token count, so a measure for how badly a corpus basically is compressed, shows opposite correlations between tasks that are robust to language variation and tasks that are sensitive to language variation. So this kind of hints at some interesting differences in the requirements for good tokenizers for variation sensitive and variation robust tasks. I'll wrap up with some limitations and future directions. I already said that specifically investigating different types of language variation could be really helpful. Further, and we're not the first to find this, but I want to emphasize that really an efficient way to evaluate tokenizers is crucial. So should we look at small or big models and look at downstream performance, generative or discriminative models, maybe something like logistic regression helps, like really simple models. We tried that. You can have a look at our paper. Overall, what I would like to leave you with is that language variation might be important to consider really at all stages of building LLMs.